part that's probably causing you issues will be a little extra time. And I know this firsthand as I'm, kind of opening up about that. Might be an extra few weeks. It might even be an extra few months if like you're really, depends on how, I guess picky you are. It depends on how, intense you are with wanting to like really see it come together.
Hi guys, I'm really struggling with my upper thighs. I train them basically every day and I'm building muscle. The fat in the inner thighs is so stubborn. Any tips on lifestyle changes or exercises? And I really like this question because we haven't spoken too much about like specific body point training. And in general, it's very hard to isolate one body point for a position of change. So like spot reduction, like if you're like, I only want to lose fat on my stomach, it's not really how the body works. It'll lose fat at the amounts it wants to and when it wants to. And there is some science saying that like training a specific area could help with some spot reduction, but at a tiny, tiny, barely noticeable threshold. So what I'm getting at is if you have a high body fat and you just do crunches and you just lose weight and you're targeting that area and you're putting heat packs on it, you're not going to get shredded abs. That's not going to happen. So if you want to see macro changes, even if it's just in a small area, you need to do those macro things. You need to be in a deficit and you need to start taking off fat. I mentioned before, different body types, everyone's different. Kyle will store more fat in his stomach, unfortunately, which isn't ideal for abs because he needs to get quite lean to get abs. But at the same time, his upper body is very lean. He'll have vascular shoulders very fast, whereas I store a lot more fat in my upper body, not as much in my abs, which I'm thankful for, and then obviously a lot in my legs. So case in point, I might see abs sooner than Kyle will at a high body fat, but it will take me longer to get vascular shoulders. I will need to get quite lean. And this is just how we are. We're all entirely different. Our body loses fat how it wants to lose it. And like I said, everyone is so specific. When you know your body, you kind of know, like Kyle knows this about his physique. In fact, I know it. I'm sharing it here. I know how my physique works for the most part. And in general, the only way you can change this is if you're really out of shape and if you have a bad history of being out of shape. Ideally, healthy fat, you want to be storing it in your legs, your buttocks, all those areas really are where you want to have it. So if you have fatter thighs, that is a more natural thing, if you will. And to get very, very lean legs, obviously you need to lose weight. And legs and thighs are interesting because people really want to have big built glutes, obviously with some fat there as well, so they look shaped, but you can still see the shape of the muscle. But people often will want to have leaner legs or not have too much unwanted fat or to remove cellulite. And this is where it can get very nuanced in this question. And I love this comment about the upper thighs in particular, because I know there's huge hype on like thigh gaps and things like that. And obviously there's a lot of focus to like thigh shaping movements, what you need to do to get a thigh gap. And this has been a little less prevalent. And I think that's why we haven't spoken to it. But with all that said, the main thing is it's usually the macro changes that will actually target this area the best. So actually just being in a deficit and having that patience, because that fat might peel off your upper body first or your face, and then it will maybe come to your legs later, or maybe you'll lose it at your legs later. But you just need to actually start that process of reducing weight. And if you have a really bad history and you have a ton of visceral fat because you eat a lot, you have a lot of stress, you're drinking, like obviously when you get that off, your fat storage may change as you put on more muscle. But the best thing you can do with these areas, it's not as much about losing fat as it is building muscle. So if you actually build really great, well-built legs and you really focus on adduction, abduction, building your glutes, that's how you can actually really change the shape of your glutes. And while you're losing fat in that process, that's where you can see more shape. And that's where you're probably going to get that look you're going for, and you're going to begin that process. And it's very hard to narrow in because I don't have any photos of this individual, but I want to let you through the thought process. So if someone reached out to me with this question, they want to be coached, let's say they're at 30% body fat, we'd work on pulling down body fat, kind of looking at how they want to develop their legs. And maybe they want to have a look where they want to have huge glutes. They just want to have very toned legs. And if that's the case, obviously we'd really prioritize heavy glute training. We might not be going absolutely berserk with the quads and hams. Obviously, if you're going to develop your glutes, you will develop your quads and hams. Whereas some other people just want to have crazy quads, or maybe they already have dominant quads. I have a client, Victoria, and her quads are insane. They've always been insane. So I program way less quads for her. We'll put her on the screen. Actually, you can see it on Spotify, or YouTube now, which is really cool. But you can see her quads are super dominant. So for her, I actually don't give her much quad programming because they're already so dominant in this effect that we focus on hamstring, we focus on glutes to really build out a rounded leg. But perhaps you want to work towards a certain look. That's where you can begin to manipulate your body composition and in your training to create more of a look. But more often than not, you're going to really pronounce where you already are, and you can begin to adjust things as you go. But the best and easiest thing to do, with my long answer here, if you want to lose fat on the upper thighs, is just to lose fat and continue that process. But outside of that, obviously, would be being a little bit more tactical in how you train them. But you're not going to see crazy changes in shape if you don't lose any weight and you just start doing like weird exercises or anything on the ground. It's really important, if you want to lose fat, you need to lose fat. And then when you lose that fat, you can see more of that compositional change by strength training and actually changing your composition.
Yeah, that was so well said. And I'm glad Josh mentioned all that because it really is relevant, even when you think of like how your bodies react to fat loss, step by step, right? And using the example of my, ab situation, it is interesting because even me, I know that when it comes to a certain point of like losing fat and I'm entering a deficit, it has to be, under 170 pounds I have to be in order to see like the love handle start to go away. Under 160 or around 160 is when like the abs really come in. And, I think some people struggle because they don't really know themselves as well. Because, maybe they've been on this journey of like maintaining for a while. Like for me, I know that I've done this so many times, a lot of cuts, a lot of shreds, a lot of shreds, a lot of bulks, a lot of maintaining. So it's pretty cool to be able to know, hey, if I need to get to this point, this is what it's going to take. And the main takeaway from that is that part that's probably causing you issues will be a little extra time. And I know this firsthand as I'm, kind of opening up about that. Might be an extra few weeks. It might even be an extra few months if like you're really, depends on how, I guess picky you are. It depends on how, intense you are with wanting to like really see it come together. But it's not an overnight thing. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, and where I see people go wrong is trying to go in, like, for example, wanting to do like a million different abductors and adductors, and then they'll like buy a booty band and try to do a lot of band work and just think that that's all going to get better. But the truth is that with Josh's tip of just losing body fat in itself, being more patient and staying at it for a consistent amount of time, and then also just doing the big movements will make a big difference. Because like I said, the small little band work isn't going to make a big difference in your overall journey. Even if you're trying to grow your glutes, you're not going to get that from just doing, couple kickbacks and some band stuff. But anything like heavy squat related, a nice hinge, which would typically be, a stiff leg deadlift, and adding in some hip thrusts, some nice solid hypertrophy within your hamstring curls, like 12 to 15 reps with some step ups and quad extensions. Like doing the right movements over time is what's going to get you there, along with that deficit. Now, if you go in and you just start training hard and intense, that's awesome. But with your goal that you're striving for in this question, you have to get that nutrition down, which is actually going to make the biggest difference. So very well said. This obviously goes for anything, right? If I'm like, hey, I want to lose my upper body fat, and some people like their arms bother them, like the kind of the tricep fat, or like the fat around like the back, like around the bra line. A lot of these things, it's all going to apply. It's like you can't spot reduce, or like for most people you can't. It's not something I would pay attention to. It's do the right movements over time, enter that deficit, stay consistent, rinse and repeat. And it's easier than it sounds, but that's something we specialize in, and we've helped thousands of people with this specific scenario.
Yeah, and if you're very new to training, if you actually just build muscle, you will see a lot of change. But if you're a trained individual, like we said, it's really important you get in that deficit, you lose that fat. And one thing I'll also say too is you need to be very, especially in the leg area, you need to be very aware that a lot of looks are only achievable by certain mechanisms. Because right now there's a lot of people with fat transfers to their glutes, and there's a lot of Brazilian butt lifts. And those two in particular, I find they're really obvious to me as a trainer, because you see someone with very full glutes and maybe not a ton of muscle or whatnot, but you'll see that their legs are just super pencily. Like they don't have musculature. Calves will have no muscle, the quad, the ham, but then there'll just be these massive glutes. And it creates this certain look. And if you try to emulate that with training, it's just not going to work. Your body wants to be symmetrical to a degree. So even if you emphasize glutes like crazy, but didn't do any quad or ham, there'd be some overlap and you would see some development there. So it's really important too, like, and that's where I think you got to be mindful. If you're looking at these quote unquote influencers that have this look you want, a lot of them are unfortunately plasticky or fat transfers, because that one I find is a little more hidden. And it's not going to be as realistic with training. Instead, that's where you want to look at someone who actually knows what they're doing. And it's super obvious too, because you'll see these people, especially in Florida, we saw quite a lot of it. They're in there and they're doing 5, 10 pounds, tiny squats, so weak, but they got these massive glutes that like would put me to shame. They look like they could load up 700 on the bar, right? So you do need to keep all this in mind. And I think that's where things get a little bit complex with all this different info, especially thigh gaps. You'll find a lot of people have these thigh gaps and that look if they're tall, skinny, lanky, like just some women have that physique. Whereas if you're a shorter, stockier person, it's not going to be as realistic for you. Like it's going to not necessarily be the look you have. It's easier if you're like 6 foot tall as a woman and super slender and lean. Like it's natural you would have that. If you're 5 foot tall and you have like not a stockier look, that sounds bad, but you want to play into what your strengths are. I find a lot of people want what they don't have. That slender person will want to look more developed. With me being taller, if I want to look really thick and muscular, I'm just going to get destroyed by the manlets out there, which are the short dudes that are really jacked, because they just look super built because they got more of that squat physique and it's easier to. Whereas when you have a really long limb, it's harder to fill that out. But that's where I find one of the worst things you can do in just ending the segment is trying to look like someone else. Instead, try to look like the best version of yourself. Be honest with your strengths and your weaknesses. Work on your weaknesses, complement your strengths if necessary, maybe tone down on them so you can focus more on your weaknesses and improve your skill set. And you'll find you'll just be really proud of how you look, because a lot of this, you can't see these drastic changes without plastic or something, but you can really build a really healthy, amazing physique that I assure you people will want your physique to have a different physique. It's just the way it goes. So just something to consider as we end that. Anything else there?
No, it was very well said.